The Andorian High Council's desperate gambit to save their species hinged on three young females and their mission to uncover the secrets hidden between human males' legs. As Uko, Mira, and Zella materialized on a bustling New York City street, their antennae twitched with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Their blue skin, concealed beneath holographic disguises, tingled with the unfamiliar sensation of Earth's atmosphere. Uko, the team leader, surveyed the concrete jungle before her. The towering skyscrapers and endless streams of vehicles were a far cry from the crystalline spires of their homeworld. She turned to her companions, her voice barely audible above the city's cacophony. Remember our objective. We must gather information on human male anatomy, particularly their reproductive organs. Our people's future depends on it. Mira and Zella nodded, their eyes wide as they took in the overwhelming sights and sounds. The Andorian population had been in decline for generations, their genetic pool stagnating despite their advanced technology. This mission was their last hope to find a solution to their fertility crisis. As the trio began to navigate the unfamiliar terrain of human society, they quickly realized the enormity of their task. Earth's culture and social norms were vastly different from their own, and their subtle alien features drew curious glances from passersby. Uko made a swift decision. We'll cover more ground if we separate. Mira, head east. Zella, take the west. I'll explore this area. We'll rendezvous at sunset. With a final adjustment to their disguises, the three Andorians parted ways. Uko found herself drawn to a lively establishment, its windows adorned with neon signs advertising various alcoholic beverages. She pushed open the door, stepping into the smoky interior of a sports bar. The air was thick with the scent of beer and fried food. Uko's antenna twitched beneath her holographic camouflage as she scanned the room, her gaze settling on a human male seated alone at the bar. His broad shoulders and alert posture spoke of military training, piquing her interest. Gathering her courage, Uko approached the man. "Greetings," she said, her voice carrying a slight alien lilt. "I am curious about human physiology. Might you assist me?" The man turned, his dark eyes narrowing as he assessed her. "Name's Henry Holmes," he replied, his tone cautious but intrigued. "And you are?" "Uko," she answered, taking the seat next to him. "I'm particularly interested in male anatomy." Henry's eyebrows shot up, but before he could respond, a commotion near the bar's entrance caught their attention. A group of men in dark suits had entered, their eyes scanning the room with predatory focus. Unbeknownst to Uko, her presence on Earth had not gone unnoticed. Colonel Jared Stryker, head of a clandestine Earth defense organization, had mobilized his team to track down and capture the alien visitors. He viewed them as a potential threat to global security, their true intentions unknown. As Uko attempted to steer the conversation back to her research objectives, she found herself struggling with Earth's social customs. Her direct questions about human reproductive organs drew strange looks from nearby patrons, and Henry's initial wariness began to give way to curiosity about her odd behavior. Meanwhile, across the city, Mira and Zella were facing their own challenges. Mira found herself in an awkward situation at a public swimming pool. Her questions about human anatomy causing a lifeguard to nearly fall from his observation tower. Zella, having wandered into a bustling shopping mall, was becoming increasingly flustered by the complex rituals of human courtship she observed around her. Back on the Andorian homeworld, the High Council monitored the mission with growing concern. The lack of progress and the increasing risk of exposure threatened to doom their species to extinction. Debates raged about whether to abort the mission and recall their researchers. In the bar, Henry leaned closer to Uko, his voice low. "Look, I'm not sure what's going on here, but you seem like you could use some help. Why don't we go somewhere a little more private to talk?" Uko nodded eagerly, unaware that her interaction with Henry had caught the attention of Colonel Stryker's agents. As they left the bar together, the fate of human Andorian relations and the future of the Andorian species hung in the balance, all hinging on the secrets hidden between human males' legs. As Uko and Henry left the bar, the cool evening air hit their faces. Henry guided her down the bustling sidewalk, his hand lightly touching her elbow. "I know a quiet place where we can talk," he said, his voice low and reassuring. They walked a few blocks, Uko's antenna twitching beneath her holographic disguise as she took in the cacophony of city sounds. The neon lights of storefronts reflected in puddles on the sidewalk, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that fascinated the Andorian. Henry led her into a small cafe, its warm lighting and soft jazz music, a stark contrast to the noise outside. They settled into a secluded booth in the corner, away from prying eyes and ears. Uko's gaze darted around the room, taking in every detail of this new human environment. "So," Henry began, leaning forward slightly, "you mentioned something about male anatomy. What exactly are you trying to learn?" Uko's attention snapped back to Henry. She struggled to find the right words, her mission's urgency battling with her need for discretion. "I am conducting research," she said carefully. "The specifics of human male reproductive organs are of great interest to my organization." Henry's eyebrows raised, a mix of amusement and suspicion crossing his face. He reached for his coffee, but as he lifted the cup, his hand slipped. The dark liquid splashed onto Uko's hand, causing her to jerk back in surprise. For a split second, her holographic disguise flickered, revealing a flash of blue skin. Henry's eyes widened, his suspicions confirmed. He opened his mouth to speak, but Uko cut him off. "I apologize for the deception," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the fate of my entire species depends on this mission. I need to know about human male anatomy, specifically what's between your legs." Henry sat back, stunned by her directness. He looked at her closely, noticing the subtle alien features he'd missed before. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, his voice a mix of awe and caution. Before Uko could respond, the cafe's door burst open. Colonel Jared Stryker strode in, flanked by two agents in dark suits. Their eyes locked onto Uko and Henry's booth. Henry's military training kicked in instantly. He grabbed Uko's hand, pulling her out of the booth. "Kitchen, now," he hissed, guiding her towards the back of the cafe. They burst through the swinging doors, startling a young chef who dropped a pan with a clatter. Henry led Uko through the maze of stainless steel counters and appliances, the shouts of Stryker and his agents echoing behind them. They emerged into a narrow alley, the smell of garbage and rain-soaked asphalt filling their nostrils. Henry pulled out his phone as they ran, his fingers flying over the screen. "Jack," he panted into the device, "I need your help. Safe house. Now." As they navigated the labyrinth of New York's back alleys, Uko's mind raced. Her mission was in jeopardy, but this human was risking everything to help her. She needed to explain, to make him understand the gravity of her people's plight. They ducked into a doorway, both breathing heavily. Henry peered around the corner, checking for pursuers. Uko seized the moment. "My people, the Andorians are dying," she said, her voice urgent but low. "Our genetic pool is stagnating. We need human genetic material to save our species from extinction." Henry turned to her, his expression softening. "That's why you're here? To save your people?" Uko nodded, her antenna drooping slightly beneath her disguise. "It's our last hope." A car horn blared nearby, making them both jump. Henry grabbed Uko's hand again. "Come on, Jack's place isn't far." As they made their way through the city, Uko's thoughts turned to Mira and Zella. She hoped they were safe, unaware of the compromising situations her companions had found themselves in. Across town, Mira stood wide-eyed in the entrance of what she now realized was decidedly not a medical research facility. The pulsing music and scantily clad men on stage made that abundantly clear. She backed away slowly, bumping into Zela, who had just exited a nearby building with a perplexed expression. "I don't understand," Zela whispered. "Why would humans store their genetic material in small plastic cups?" Before Mira could respond, they spotted a group of men in dark suits approaching. Recognizing the potential threat, they slipped into the crowd, their hearts racing. Back on the Andorian homeworld, the High Council convened in an emergency session. The holographic displays showed the last known locations of their operatives, blinking ominously in an unfamiliar cityscape. "We cannot risk their capture," one council member argued. "The humans must not discover our intentions." Another countered, But we cannot abandon our only hope for survival. We must give them more time. As the debate raged on, a message flashed across the screens. Mira and Zella's urgent plea for extraction. The council fell silent, the weight of their decision pressing down on them like a physical force. Meanwhile, Henry, Uko, and Jack huddled in the safe house, a modest apartment in Brooklyn. Jack's initial skepticism had evaporated the moment Uko dropped her holographic disguise, revealing her true blue-skinned, antenna-bearing form. "So what's the plan?" Jack asked, his eyes darting between Henry and the alien visitor. Henry paced the small living room. "We need to find Uko's companions and get them out of the city, but Stryker and his team are everywhere." Uko sat on the edge of a worn armchair, her antenna twitching nervously. "My people will extract us if we don't report success soon. We're running out of time." As they began to formulate a rescue plan, across the city in a top-secret lab, Colonel Stryker watched intently as a scientist examined Uko's hair sample under a microscope. The implications of what they might discover caused great concern on his mind. Were these aliens a threat to national security, or could they be the key to unimaginable scientific breakthroughs? The clock ticked relentlessly forward, each second bringing the Andorians closer to their deadline and humanity closer to a revelation that could change everything. In the safe house, Henry, Uko, and Jack prepared for a daring rescue mission, unaware of the forces aligning against them and the true scope of the challenge that lay ahead. In the safe house, Henry, Uko, and Jack prepared for a daring rescue mission, unaware of the forces aligning against them and the true scope of the challenge that lay before them. As the first rays of sunlight peeked through the grimy windows of the Brooklyn apartment, Henry roused himself from a fitful sleep on the worn couch. He blinked, momentarily disoriented, before the events of the previous night came rushing back. His gaze fell on Uko, her blue skin shimmering in the pale morning light as she sat cross-legged on the floor, her antenna twitching slightly as she meditated. Jack emerged from the kitchenette, clutching a steaming mug of coffee. "I've got a lead on your friends," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "My contacts spotted 2 individuals matching their description near Central Park." Henry nodded, his military training kicking in as he formulated a plan. "We need to move fast. Stryker won't be far behind." Uko's eyes snapped open, her alien features set with drive. "Let's go!" The trio moved swiftly through the awakening city, Jack's security firm van providing cover as they navigated the morning traffic. Henry's fingers drummed against his thigh, his mind racing through possible scenarios. Beside him, Uko fidgeted with her holographic disguise, her anxiety palpable in the confined space. As they approached Central Park, Jack's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "Stryker's on the move. He's deployed additional teams across the city." Henry's lips pursed. What's got him so riled up? "Lab results came back on that hair sample," Jack replied, his eyes meeting Henry's in the rearview mirror. "Whatever they found, it's big enough to turn this into a full-scale manhunt." Uko's antenna drooped slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our genetic makeup, if they've discovered its potential compatibility with human DNA..." Henry reached out, his hand finding hers in a gesture of reassurance. "We'll figure it out. First, we need to find your friends." They parked near the edge of the park, the early morning joggers and dog walkers providing a semblance of normalcy. Henry scanned the area, his trained eye picking out potential threats and escape routes. "There," he murmured, nodding towards Bethesda Fountain. 2 figures stood near the water's edge, their posture rigid and unnatural among the relaxed parkgoers. Mira and Zella, still maintaining their human disguises, looked lost and out of place in the bustling heart of New York City. Henry, Uko, and Jack approached cautiously, weaving through the growing crowd. They were mere yards away when a group of men in dark suits emerged from behind the trees, their hands reaching for concealed weapons. "Stryker," Henry hissed, his body tensing for action. What happened next was a blur of motion and sound. Henry lunged forward, tackling the nearest agent as Jack engaged another. Uko sprinted towards her companions, her voice rising in a language Henry didn't recognize. In the chaos, Mira's holographic disguise flickered and failed, revealing her true Andorian form. A woman screamed, the sound piercing through the morning air. Panic rippled through the crowd as people began to realize the alien presence among them. "Run!" Henry shouted, grabbing Uko's arm and gesturing wildly to Mira and Zella. They ran, weaving through the panicked crowd, the shouts of Stryker's men echoing behind them. Henry's mind raced, searching for an escape route. His eyes landed on a nearby subway entrance. "This way!" he called, leading the group down the stairs and into the underground station. They burst through the turnstiles, ignoring the indignant shouts of the station attendant. A train pulled into the station, its doors sliding open with a hiss. Without hesitation, they piled in, the doors closing behind them just as Stryker's men reached the platform. As the train lurched into motion, Henry allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. He looked around at the bewildered faces of his companions. Mira and Zella huddled together, their holographic disguises reasserted but clearly strained. Uko stood nearby, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "Are you all right?" Henry asked, his voice low. Uko nodded, her antenna twitching beneath her disguise. I've never experienced anything like that before." As the train rumbled through the tunnels beneath New York, Uko quickly explained their mission to Mira and Zella. The two Andorians listened intently, relief and concern warring on their faces. Jack, meanwhile, was engrossed in his phone, his fingers flying over the screen. "I've got us a way out," he said after a few minutes. "A private jet, small airport outside the city. We can be there in an hour." Henry nodded, his mind already planning their next move. But as he looked at Uko, he felt a strange tug in his chest. Despite the danger, despite the absurdity of their situation, he found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. Uko met his gaze, her alien eyes filled with an emotion Henry couldn't quite decipher. For a moment, the chaos around them faded away, and Henry was acutely aware of the warmth of her presence beside him. The moment was broken as the train screeched to a halt at the next station. Henry shook himself, pushing aside the confusing mix of emotions. They had a mission to complete, and time was running out. As they exited the subway and made their way towards Jack's waiting vehicle, Henry couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal was just the beginning. Stryker was still out there, hunting them with renewed vigor. And beyond that, the fate of an entire alien species hung in the balance. With a final glance at the city skyline, Henry ushered the group into the car. As they pulled away from the curb, he found himself wondering what other surprises this extraordinary day would bring. With a final glance at the city skyline, Henry ushered the group into the car. As they pulled away from the curb, he found himself wondering what other surprises this extraordinary day would hold. The answer came sooner than he expected. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, Henry's mind began to race with a daring plan. He turned to Uko, his eyes alight with commitment. "I think I know how we can get out of here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "But it's risky." Uko leaned in, her antenna twitching with curiosity beneath her holographic disguise. "What do you have in mind?" Henry outlined his audacious scheme. They would commandeer one of Colonel Stryker's helicopters. It was a plan that hinged on Henry's military expertise and Uko's advanced alien technology. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about stealing from a top-secret government facility. That's insane." "Exactly," Henry replied with a grim smile. "It's so crazy, they won't expect it." As they approached the airport where Stryker's forces were based, Henry and Uko prepared themselves for the task ahead. Uko produced a small device from a hidden compartment in her clothing, its sleek design unlike anything Henry had seen before. "This will disrupt their security systems," she explained, her fingers dancing over its surface. "But we'll only have a short window of opportunity." Henry nodded, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. As Jack brought the car to a stop in a secluded area near the airport's perimeter, Henry turned to Mira and Zella. "Stay with Jack," he instructed. "If things go south, get out of here, and we'll find another way to contact you." With a final nod to Jack, Henry and Uko slipped out of the car and made their way towards the fence. Uko's device hummed to life, and suddenly the electrified barrier before them went dark. They quickly cut through and entered the compound. Moving swiftly and silently, they navigated through the maze of hangars and buildings. Uko's device continued to work its magic, disabling cameras and electronic locks as they went. Finally, they reached their target, a sleek black helicopter, its rotors still and silent in the early morning light. "Can you fly this thing?" Uko whispered as they approached. Henry grinned. "Watch me." As they climbed into the cockpit, alarms began to blare across the compound. Henry's hands flew over the controls, years of training kicking in as he brought the engines to life. The rotors began to spin, slowly at first, then faster and faster. "Hang on!" he shouted as he lifted the chopper off the ground. They burst out of the hangar just as Stryker's men came running, weapons drawn. The helicopter climbed into the sky, leaving chaos in its wake. But their escape was far from clean. Within minutes, other helicopters took to the air in hot pursuit. Henry's skills were put to the ultimate test as he wove through New York's skyline, the towering skyscrapers providing both obstacles and cover. Uko worked furiously with her alien technology, jamming enemy communications and radar. "They can't get a lock on us," she reported, her voice tense with concentration. As they approached the outskirts of the city, Henry spotted a familiar vehicle speeding along the highway below. "There!" he shouted, pointing. "It's Jack!" He brought the helicopter low, skimming over the trees that lined the road. Jack, seeing them approach, veered off onto a side road that led to an open field. Henry set the chopper down with practiced precision as Jack's car screeched to a halt nearby. Mira and Zayla tumbled out of the vehicle, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and amazement. Jack was close behind, his expression a mix of relief and disbelief. "I can't believe you actually pulled it off," he shouted over the roar of the rotors. "No time to celebrate," Henry called back. "Get in." As soon as they were aboard, Henry lifted off again. The extra weight made the helicopter sluggish, but he pushed it to its limits as they climbed back into the sky. Behind them, they could see Stryker's forces converging on the field they had just left. "Where to now?" Jack asked, his voice tense. Before Henry could respond, Uko's communication device crackled to life. A voice spoke in the alien language Henry had heard before, its tone urgent. Uko's antenna drooped as she listened, her expression growing more concerned by the second. "What is it?" Henry asked, glancing at her while trying to keep his focus on flying. Uko looked up, her eyes meeting his. "It's the High Council," she said, her voice barely audible over the helicopter's noise. "Our extraction ship, it's been detected by your deep space monitoring systems. They've had to abort their approach." The implications of her words hit Henry like a physical blow. They were now truly on their own, with no clear path to safety, and Stryker's forces still in hot pursuit. As if to emphasize their predicament, a warning light began to flash on the helicopter's control panel. "We're running low on fuel," Henry announced grimly. He scanned the horizon, searching for options. In the distance, he could see the glittering expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. An idea began to form in his mind, desperate and risky, but possibly their only chance. "I think I know where we can go," he said, his voice filled with purpose. "But you're not going to like it." With that, he banked the helicopter sharply, setting a course for New York Harbor. As they flew, the first rays of the morning sun glinted off the waves, illuminating the massive cargo ships preparing to leave port. Their stolen helicopter, now dangerously low on fuel, limped towards the harbor. Henry's eyes locked onto a large container ship just beginning to pull away from the dock. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. "Everyone brace yourselves," he called out as he began their descent. "This landing is going to be tight." The ship's crew looked up in astonishment as the helicopter appeared above them, its rotors kicking up a spray of seawater. With expert precision, Henry set the aircraft down on the ship's deck, the skids touching down just as the last drops of fuel were exhausted. As the rotors slowed to a stop, Henry and his unlikely companions clambered out onto the deck, coming face to face with the ship's bewildered crew. In the distance, they could hear the approaching whine of Stryker's aircraft. Henry stepped forward, his mind racing to find the right words to convince the captain to help them. As he opened his mouth to speak, he felt Uko's hand slip into his, a gesture of solidarity in the face of their uncertain future. The ship continued to pull away from the harbor, the skyline of New York growing smaller behind them. On the deck, surrounded by confused sailors, and with the echo of Stryker's pursuit fading in the distance, Henry and his alien companions faced their next challenge, explaining their presence and securing safe passage across the Atlantic. As the captain approached, his face a mask of confusion and alarm, Henry took a deep breath. He glanced at Uko, then at Mira and Zella, their alien features hidden beneath their wavering, holographic disguises. Whatever happened next, he knew their adventure was not nearly finished. Over. Whatever happened next, he knew their adventure was far from finished. As the first light of dawn broke over the Atlantic, Henry's fleeting sense of relief evaporated. The distant rumble of engines drew his attention to the horizon, where a fleet of naval vessels materialized out of the morning mist. His heart sank as he recognized the lead ship, a destroyer bearing the unmistakable silhouette of Colonel Stryker on its deck. "We've got company," Henry called out, his voice tight with tension. The others rushed to the railing, their faces drawn with concern as they took in the approaching armada. The cargo ship's captain, still bewildered by their sudden appearance, looked from the oncoming fleet to his unexpected passengers with growing alarm. "What in God's name have you gotten us into?" he demanded, his weathered face creased with worry. Before Henry could respond, a booming voice crackled over a loudspeaker, cutting through the salt-laden air. "Attention, unauthorized passengers. This is Colonel Stryker. You are hereby ordered to surrender immediately. There is nowhere left to run." Uko's antenna twitched beneath her holographic disguise, her alien eyes meeting Henry's with a mix of fear and drive. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Henry's mind raced, scanning their surroundings for any possible escape route. His eyes landed on the ship's lifeboats, and a desperate plan began to form. "The lifeboats," he said urgently. "It's our only chance." As the group moved to prepare for their daring escape, Uko's communication device suddenly came to life, emitting a series of rapid chirps and whistles. Her expression shifted from confusion to intense concentration as she listened to the incoming message. "It's the Andorian High Council," she explained, her voice hushed but excited. "They've initiated official first contact negotiations with Earth's governments. But," her antenna drooped slightly, "progress is slow. They're advising us to avoid capture for a few more hours until they can secure diplomatic channels for our safety." Henry nodded, his eyes sharp with drive. "Then that's what we'll do. Jack, help me prep one of these lifeboats. Mira, Zella, gather any supplies you can find. We're going to need them." As Stryker's forces began to board the cargo ship, Henry and his unlikely team worked feverishly to modify one of the lifeboats. Uko's alien technology proved invaluable, transforming the simple vessel into a makeshift submersible. "It's not pretty, but it should keep us underwater long enough to slip away," Henry said, wiping sweat from his brow. The sound of boots on metal echoed across the deck as Stryker's men drew closer. With no time to spare, the group piled into their jury-rigged craft. Henry's hands flew over the unfamiliar controls, a mix of human engineering and alien tech. "Hold on tight," he warned, as he engaged the newly installed propulsion system. The lifeboat lurched, then slid smoothly into the water. As they submerged, the muffled sounds of chaos erupted above them. Through the small viewport, Henry could see the confusion on the faces of Stryker's men as they realized their quarry had vanished. But their escape was far from smooth. The improvised submersible proved difficult to control, its trajectory erratic as they drifted into deeper waters. Uko leaned over Henry's shoulder, her delicate fingers dancing across the alien interface. "The gravitational stabilizers are misaligned," she muttered, making rapid adjustments. "There, that should help." The craft's movement smoothed out, but Henry's relief was short-lived. A warning light began to flash on the control panel, accompanied by a shrill beeping. "Oxygen levels are dropping faster than anticipated," Jack reported, his face illuminated by the eerie glow of the alien tech. "We need to surface soon, or we'll suffocate." As Henry prepared to bring them up, a series of dull thuds reverberated through the water around them. The submersible rocked violently, sending its occupants sprawling. "Depth charges!" Henry shouted, recognizing the danger immediately. "Stryker must be trying to flush us out." Using every ounce of his military training, Henry navigated through the underwater minefield. The submersible creaked and groaned under the strain, but somehow held together. Uko worked alongside him, her alien reflexes complementing his human instincts as they dodged explosion after explosion. Just when it seemed they might make it, a particularly close blast sent them spiraling. Water began to seep in through hairline cracks in the hull. With no other choice, Henry pointed them towards the surface. They burst into the open air with a splash, gasping for breath. As the adrenaline faded, Henry took stock of their surroundings. To his surprise, a small, rocky island loomed before them, its shores uninhabited and wild. "There," he said, pointing towards a narrow beach. "It's our best shot for now." They beached their battered craft and stumbled onto the shore, exhausted but alive. Jack immediately set to work, his survival instincts kicking in as he searched for fresh water and edible plants. Mira and Zella huddled together, their alien physiologies struggling to adapt to the harsh Earth environment. Henry turned to Uko, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared relief and uncertainty. "We should scout the island," he suggested. "Find somewhere defensible in case Stryker manages to track us here." As they ventured inland, the dense foliage gave way to rocky outcroppings. It was Uko who first noticed the opening, half hidden behind a curtain of vines. "Henry, look," she called out, her antenna quivering with excitement. "A cave system. This could be the shelter we need." They entered cautiously, the darkness enveloping them. As their eyes adjusted, Henry noticed something odd about the cave walls. They seemed too smooth, too regular to be natural. Suddenly, Uko gasped, her antenna standing straight up. "I'm detecting energy readings," she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "Faint, but unmistakable, and they're not of Earth origin." Henry stared into the depths of the cave, a chill running down his spine. What they had stumbled upon was clearly more than just a simple hideout. As they stood at the threshold of this unexpected discovery, Henry realized their adventure had taken yet another extraordinary turn. The distant sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the island, a reminder that their pursuers were still out there, drawing ever closer. With a shared look of purpose, Henry and Uko ventured deeper into the cave, towards the source of the mysterious energy readings and whatever secrets lay hidden in the heart of this uncharted island. As Henry and Uko ventured deeper into the cave system, the darkness gave way to a soft, ethereal glow emanating from the smooth walls. Their footsteps echoed in the eerie silence, the only sound besides their quickened breathing. "These energy readings," Uko whispered, her antenna twitching with excitement. "They're getting stronger." Henry nodded, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "This definitely isn't natural. Look at the symmetry of these passages." They rounded a corner and froze. Before them stretched a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. At its center stood a circular platform surrounded by strange, obelisk-like structures. As they approached, the platform flickered to life, projecting a shimmering, holographic star map that filled the air around them. "It's beautiful," Uko breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Henry reached out, his hand passing through a cluster of stars. "What is this place?" Uko's fingers danced over an alien console, deciphering its cryptic symbols. "It's some kind of outpost," she said, her voice filled with awe, "created by a species called the progenitors." As they worked to unravel the secrets of the star map, a startling revelation emerged. The progenitors, an ancient and long-extinct species, had seeded life throughout the galaxy. The implications hit Henry like a thunderbolt. "Uko," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "this could mean humans and Andorians share a common origin." Before Uko could respond, Henry's elbow brushed against a raised symbol on the console. A sharp hum filled the air, and a dormant communication device sprang to life. A beam of energy shot upwards, penetrating the cave's ceiling. "No, no, no!" Henry frantically tried to shut it off, but it was too late. The damage was done. Uko's face paled. "That signal, it's powerful enough to reach orbit. We've just broadcasted our location to everyone." As if in response to their error, the chamber began to shake. Red warning lights flashed across the alien consoles, and a deep, resonant voice filled the air, speaking in an unknown language. "What's it saying?" Henry asked, steadying himself against a pillar. Uko's antenna drooped. "It's a failsafe. We've triggered a self-destruct sequence. We have 1 hour before this entire outpost is vaporized." Outside the cave, Jack, Mira, and Zella huddled around a makeshift signal detector cobbled together from Andorian tech and scavenged parts. The device suddenly erupted in a cacophony of beeps and whistles. "That can't be good," Jack muttered, studying the readings. His eyes widened in alarm. "We need to get them out of there, now!" As they scrambled to gather their equipment, the distant thrum of helicopter rotors filled the air. Colonel Stryker had found them. Inside the outpost, Henry and Uko raced against time, their fingers flying over the alien controls as they attempted to deactivate the self-destruct sequence. Sweat beaded on Henry's forehead as he grappled with the unfamiliar technology. "Wait," Uko said suddenly, her antenna perking up. "Look at this data. It's a complete scientific database left by the progenitors. And here, Henry, this could be the solution to our fertility crisis." Henry glanced at the information scrolling across the holographic display. "Can you transmit it to your people?" Uko nodded, her fingers already tapping out a complex sequence. "I'm sending it to our ship in orbit now." As the data streamed outward, Henry returned his focus to the self-destruct countdown. The alien symbols ticked away, each passing moment bringing them closer to annihilation. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the cave entrance. Dust and debris rained down as Jack, Mira, and Zella burst into the chamber. "We've got company," Jack shouted, his voice tight with urgency. "Stryker's men are right behind us." Henry's mind raced, assessing their options. "We need to hold them off," he said, his voice filled with purpose. "This outpost contains technology that could change everything, for both our worlds." As if on cue, the sound of boots on stone echoed through the passages. Colonel Stryker's voice boomed out, amplified by the cave's acoustics. "This is your last chance to surrender. Come out now, or we'll use force." Uko's communication device chirped urgently. "It's Captain Thorin," she said, her eyes wide. "An Andorian ship is descending for extraction. They've been detected by Earth's defense systems." Henry's heart pounded as he realized the magnitude of their situation. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, with him caught in the middle. He looked at the ancient console, then at his companions, human and alien alike. "We make our stand here," he declared, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Uko, keep working on shutting down that self-destruct. Jack, Mira, Zela, we need to barricade the entrance. Use whatever you can find." As they rushed to fortify their position, Henry's eyes fell on a pulsing crystal at the heart of the outpost, the power source. His mind whirled with the implications of such advanced energy technology. The first shots rang out, energy weapons clashing with the staccato of human firearms. Henry ducked behind a pillar, his makeshift weapon at the ready. Through the chaos, he caught Uko's eye. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Whatever happened next would shape the future of both their species. As the battle raged and the countdown ticked away, Henry knew he faced an impossible choice. The weight of two worlds pressed down on his shoulders as he prepared to make a decision that would echo across the stars. Henry's eyes darted between the pulsing crystal and the alien console, his mind racing. In that split second, he made a decision that would alter the course of two worlds. "Uko, cover me!" he shouted, diving towards the console. As energy blasts sizzled past his head, Henry's fingers flew across the unfamiliar controls. He wasn't sure what he was doing, but he knew he had to try something. Suddenly, the console lit up with a brilliant blue glow, responding to his touch in ways he couldn't have anticipated. A low hum filled the air, growing in intensity until it became a deafening roar. The very air seemed to vibrate, and then silence. In the abrupt quiet, Henry looked up to see Stryker's men frozen in place, their weapons inert. The countdown on the self-destruct sequence flickered and stopped. "What did you do?" Uko asked, her antenna quivering with a mix of fear and awe. "I'm not sure," Henry replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I think I just bought us some time." As they would soon discover, Henry had inadvertently activated an emergency protocol within the ancient progenitor technology. The outpost had generated a localized energy field, disabling all modern electronic devices within a mile radius. "The self-destruct," Uko said, her eyes wide as she studied the now frozen alien symbols. "It's paused. We have a chance." Henry nodded, his mind already racing ahead. "We need to gather as much data as we can. This might be our only opportunity to access this technology." They worked feverishly, downloading everything they could from the progenitor database. Jack, Mira, and Zella joined them, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the holographic displays. "Focus on the clean energy tech," Henry instructed, his fingers flying over the controls. "And anything that might help with the Andorian fertility crisis." As they worked, the faint sound of helicopter rotors faded into silence. Outside, Colonel Stryker's forces found themselves suddenly without working equipment, their carefully planned assault thrown into disarray. But they weren't the only ones affected. High above the island, an Andorian ship under the command of Captain Thorin shuddered as its systems failed. The craft, designed for the cold vacuum of space, began an uncontrolled descent towards the Earth's surface. Inside the outpost, Uko's communication device sparked to life for a brief moment. "Emergency landing," came the garbled transmission before it went dead again. Henry's heart raced. "We need to move, now!" As the group gathered their hard-won data and prepared to leave, Henry took one last look at the magnificent chamber. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were leaving behind something truly extraordinary. They emerged from the cave into chaos. Stryker's men stumbled about, shouting in confusion as their equipment failed to function. In the distance, a plume of smoke rose from where the Andorian ship had made its emergency landing. "This way," Henry said, leading the group towards the crash site. "That ship might be our only way off this island." They moved swiftly through the dense jungle, the humidity pressing down on them like a physical weight. As they neared the landing site, they could see the sleek form of the Andorian vessel, its hull scorched but largely intact. A figure emerged from the ship, tall and imposing. Captain Thorin, his blue skin stark against the lush green of the island vegetation, regarded them with suspicion. "Halt!" he called out, his hand resting on a weapon that, like all other technology, refused to function. Uko stepped forward, her antenna raised in a gesture of peace. "Captain Thorin, we come seeking refuge. We have information vital to the future of Andoria." Thorin's eyes narrowed. "And why should I trust you, especially in the company of humans?" Henry stepped up beside Uko. "Because we've just discovered the key to solving your fertility crisis, and possibly to revolutionizing energy production for both our worlds." For a long moment, Thorin stared at them, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. Come aboard, but know that if this is a trick, you will face the full consequences of Andorian justice." As they boarded the ship, the sound of shouting echoed through the trees. Stryker's forces had regrouped and were closing in. "We need to get this ship operational," Henry said, looking at the dead control panels. Uko nodded, already moving towards the engine room. "The energy field is weakening. We might be able to jumpstart the systems." They worked frantically, human and Andorian alike, racing against time as the sound of Stryker's approach grew louder. Slowly, systems began to flicker back to life. Just as the first of Stryker's men burst into the clearing, weapons at the ready, the ship's engines roared to life. Henry, drawing on every bit of his piloting experience, took the controls. "Hold on!" he shouted as the ship lurched upward, narrowly avoiding a barrage of gunfire. As they climbed higher, breaking through the clouds, a new challenge presented itself. Earth's space defense systems, now fully operational, locked onto the alien craft. Alarms blared throughout the ship. Captain Thorin's face was grim as he announced, "Earth's weapons are targeting us. We have minutes before they open fire." Henry looked at Uko, then at the precious data they had risked everything to obtain. In that moment, he knew what they had to do. "We need to make them an offer they can't refuse," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "It's time to change the course of history." As Uko began preparing a data package that would demonstrate the potential benefits of human-Andorian cooperation, Henry took a deep breath. He was about to broadcast a message that would forever alter the relationship between Earth and the stars. The fate of two worlds now rested in their hands. Hands. The tension in the ship was palpable as Henry's finger hovered over the broadcast button. With a deep breath, he pressed it, sending their message out into the void. Silence enveloped the bridge as they waited for a response. Minutes stretched into hours, each passing moment feeling like an eternity. The ship's damaged systems groaned and sputtered, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. Captain Thorin paced the length of the bridge, his blue skin glistening with sweat. "We can't maintain orbit indefinitely," he muttered, glancing at the flickering control panels. Henry nodded, his eyes never leaving the communication display. "Just a little longer," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, the console erupted with a burst of static. A clear voice cut through the noise. "Andorian vessel, this is Earth Command. We've received your transmission." The crew collectively held their breath as the voice continued. "The United Nations Security Council has agreed to a preliminary meeting. You are granted permission to land at our secure facility in Geneva, Switzerland. Proceed to the following coordinates." As the coordinates flashed across the screen, a mix of relief and apprehension washed over the bridge. They had avoided immediate conflict, but the real challenge was just beginning. Captain Thorin took the helm, his experienced hands guiding the ship into Earth's atmosphere. As they descended, Henry noticed several sleek fighter jets flanking their vessel. "Are they here to protect us or shoot us down if we make a wrong move?" he wondered aloud. Uko placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, her antenna twitching nervously. "Let's hope it's the former," she said, her eyes fixed on the approaching landmass below. The ship touched down with a gentle thud on a specially prepared runway. As the engines powered down, Henry could see a large gathering of people waiting for them. Men and women in suits, military uniforms, and lab coats stood in neat rows, their faces a mix of curiosity and caution. "Ready?" Henry asked, turning to Uko. She nodded, straightening her posture. "As I'll ever be." The ship's door hissed open, and Henry stepped out into the bright sunlight. He blinked, adjusting to the glare, and took a deep breath of Earth air. As he moved to help Uko disembark, he noticed her stumble, her legs shaky under Earth's stronger gravity. Without thinking, Henry caught her, their bodies pressed close. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world around them faded away. In that instant, Henry saw not an alien diplomat, but a person, vulnerable, nervous, and brave. The spell was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Henry looked up to see a stern-faced man in a crisp suit extending his hand. "Welcome to Earth," the man said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I'm Secretary General Yamamoto of the United Nations. We have much to discuss." As introductions were made and the initial formalities observed, Henry couldn't help but notice Colonel Stryker standing off to the side, his face a mask of barely held back frustration. Their eyes met briefly, and Henry saw a flicker of resignation in the colonel's gaze. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Endless meetings, debates, and scientific presentations filled every waking hour. Henry and Jack found themselves thrust into the role of mediators, their military backgrounds proving invaluable in navigating the complex web of international politics. In one particularly heated session, Henry stood before a panel of world leaders, his voice steady as he explained the potential benefits of the progenitor technology. "Imagine a world without energy crises," he said, gesturing to the holographic displays Uko had set up. "Clean, limitless power that could transform our planet, and that's just the beginning." As the negotiations progressed, Henry and Uko found brief moments of respite. During one such break, they walked through the immaculately kept gardens of the Geneva compound. "Your world is beautiful," Uko said, her antenna swaying gently in the breeze. "So full of life and variety. It's no wonder your species has thrived here." Henry smiled, watching a butterfly land on a nearby flower. "It's not without its problems," he admitted, "but I suppose that's true of any world." Uko turned to him, her expression serious. "Henry, I've been studying human relationships, the complexities of your emotions, your concept of love." She paused, seeming to gather her courage. "I believe I'm experiencing something similar. towards you. Henry felt his heart skip a beat. He had been so focused on the negotiations, on the fate of two worlds, that he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge the growing connection between them. "Uko, he began, but was interrupted by the chime of his communicator. "Mr. Chen," came the voice of Secretary General Yamamoto, "we're ready to reconvene. Ambassador Uko's presence is requested as well." As they made their way back to the conference room, Henry's mind raced. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and now his own heart was caught in the middle. Whatever came next, he knew that nothing would ever be the same.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.